Okay, thank you. We're back for the Advisory Committee public hearing. We left off at Article 11, which deals with monies for the improvement or embellishment of cemeteries. I have to say, I'm not exactly sure how to handle this one because I don't have a number for us to vote. Is anybody here from Cemetery Commission? Maybe you can help out, Paul.
Yeah, Gene Ham had to leave, but he asked me if I would cover for him. So, don't ask anything hard.
Well, I'll read the article, and it would seem to me that if we're going to make a recommendation, there ought to be a number, which we can also put this off until Tuesday when we've got the town accountant, which might be the simpler thing to do.
You're looking for the exact number?
Yeah.
What was the question?
The number.
Article 11.
I don't have the number, but I can explain that this is just taking money that they generate and giving it back to them.
Right.
It's really no
It's
impact on
usual
the tax.
boilerplate, but I think we should know what the number is before we vote it. So I'm going to hold this one over until Tuesday.
Does Dave Williams know that?
There's a budget item of
I don't think he has
$46,000.
I'm not sure if this is this or not. Okay, that brings us to Article 12, which is to see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to accept the gift of an easement over land located at 59 Whitney Street and part of the Whitney Farms development for the purpose of providing access from Whitney Street to the Upper Charles Trail and for the right to park up to 4 motor vehicles within the easement on such terms and conditions as the board deems to be in the best interests of the town or take any other action thereto. Careful.
I'm John Higley, Chairman of the Planning Board, and Gino Carlucci, Town Planner. This article and the other Planning Board related articles, just really want to look at the town long-term and say the long-term goal. I met with the Board of Health this week and referenced that the CDC, Guide to Community Preventative Services Relative to Health, said that 5 elements for a healthier community are compact, varied village centers, good connections for walking, bicycling, and transit, inviting designs and destinations, safety and access for all, and healthy food and affordable access. Unhealthy is not. So this project, this is the Upper Charles Rail Trail. There's 3 regional trails opportunities that Sherborn has, and this is Sherborn, and this is the Upper Charles River Rail Trail that will go through Hopkinton and Ashland and Milford and Holliston. The part from Holliston down to Milford is now 12 miles of trail that you can actually walk on without getting your feet wet. So that's a big improvement. The part of Milford is hard paved. It's in it's hardly in a semi-rural town like us, but it's hard paved. And in Holliston, it's in the process. The town Sherborn with a grant, Sherborn spent $12,000 in acquiring the section from Whitney Street south to the Holliston line. That's about 2.3 acres, a quarter mile of rail bed. We acquired that at the cost of $12,000 to the town using a grant. And the part we're talking about now is this, if I zoom in then, is this easement here. So here's Whitney Street, and here's the rail trail section. And so this is the easement we're talking about. It's to be negotiated with Rising Tide, the developer of Whitney Farms. So opportunistically, this is the time to get this easement. There's no cost to the town in terms of maintenance or anything at this point because the trail's not in active use. we're in the process of, if I go back to this other, sorry, if I go back to this other picture, the other regional trails, one is called the Sudbury Aqueduct Trail, that's just in the process of being developed. It goes on the northern border of the town, and then the Bay Circuit Trail is this trail here that encompasses all around Metro Boston. These are regional trails, long-term. In this case, this easement, there's no cost to the town, it's just the opportunity to get it now, and that's really what we're talking about. Anything else I should have?
Any questions? Robert?
Robert Johnson, Western Avenue. Is there parking area included in this easement?
That's what it's for.
For how many cars?
For 4 cars. So the development has 2 entrances. One is the regular entrance, and the other is a emergency access entrance, and that's the part that would have space for 4 parking spots, and then also this access.
Elliot?
Elliot Taylor, 30 North Main. I'm opposed to this rail trail coming into Sherborn. So about 800 feet from the Holliston line back to Whitney Street Bridge, probably today is under about 6 inches of water. It's a vernal pool, and conservation says they might let them build through the vernal pool. I personally cannot fathom them, pun intended, going through a vernal pool. They just about hang people for cutting a tree in a wetland, and then they're gonna let them come through. Whitney Street is a very narrow road. Don't believe me, try walking it sometime and say your prayers first. I don't think we want bicycles coming into Sherborn to use Whitney Street, Western Avenue, and Maple Street to get to this rail trail. Go down to Holliston, just a few hundred feet down. There's plenty of parking areas down there, and they can go from there to wherever. But I'm opposed to this 800-foot section in Sherborn on this rail trail, and I'll be voting no on this. Thank you.
Michael Lesser, Conservation Commission. I don't think we've hung anybody lately doing anything, but we've nobody's come with a specific plan, but there are ways in which a trail can be put there, just with even including the vernal pool and other wetland issues there. So it's by no means I think there are a range of mechanisms by which this could be used as a trail, and we haven't taken a vote, but many of the people are in favor of this kind of open space and trail networking. So I think it would be useful. I would be in favor of this. Neil?
Neil McPherson, just a point and a question. Very simply, we worked hard with the developer to make sure that we have the appropriate emergency access. So as you put in those parking spots, if that alters that emergency access, I just would like to make sure there's a conversation if that does in any fashion or form.
If I can answer that, the parking design, the emergency access comes out to Whitney Street. The parking spaces are on both sides of that access, so it does not impede the emergency access at all. Another point I'd just like to make, the rail trail is already there, the town owns it. This short section gives us access, as John said, to 12 miles of trail that are in other towns, and we just have this sort of entry point. We're kind of lucky to have a very small responsibility that gives us access to a huge trail. Also, the easement is a requirement of, or providing the easement is a requirement of the comprehensive permit for Whitney Farms development. It's already drafted, it's already in place. This is just a matter of accepting it. It's not something like new that has to be worked out. It's just a matter of that the selectmen have to be authorized to accept the easement.
Could I make one point? To reiterate, I think what was said before, this is free. And by accepting it, it authorizes us to do it. You're not committing to anything other than allowing the town to have property rights.
Okay, I'll take a motion to recommend favorable action on Article 12. Moved.
Second.
All in, any further discussion? All in favor? Passes 8-0. Okay. Article 13, to see if the town will vote to amend Section 3.2 Schedule of Use Regulations in the following manner. And I will allow you to describe that.
All right. Much like the trails, I think, thinking about long-term, thinking about Sherborn long-term, and our current general plan written in 2001, the planning board's been working on an update by focusing on the town center. We have a town center report, and both our current general plan and our draft town center report, there are aspects that are addressed here. That adding senior housing is a goal in town. Increasing the walkability or the density of the town center. This article proposes to make some changes to make that type of improvement to the town center more feasible. For office, we're adding elderly and affordable, and for retail, we're adding elderly and affordable. And then for assisted living, we're enabling business general. So, in looking at the article, the schedule of use, which is section 3.2, and then it's shown in the article that the REA, or the elderly and affordable, would be permissible, provided the town meeting preliminary development plan approval has been granted, or it takes such other action related. So the planning board is in the process now, we'll look at it, other articles, of reviewing that process. The preliminary development plan went to, the planning board goes to advisory here, and then goes to the town meeting, and then that process also, then after that, assuming it passes all that, the proposal for a preliminary development plan would be reviewed as in a final development plan by the planning board. That's the process that would be required for these changes to section 3.2, 17, 19, and 32. So we think this is a good thing to make elderly and affordable housing more feasible and attractive. As I say, this is a goal in our general plan.
So, to really make an informed decision on Article 13, do we need to talk about Articles 14 and 15?
Well, they started very much related. I think when we look at 14 and 15, it's less critical, but they're very much related. So we can go right on to.
Can 14 and 15 proceed without 13?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, if I can add to that, in the very beginning, this was conceived as part of what's going to happen in 14 and 15, but what you will see when we get to those, that preliminary development plan for elderly housing is going to be presented. What this article does is allow a preliminary development plan to include limited office or retail and even assisted living uses, but only as part of a preliminary development plan approved at town meeting. So it's not like an open-ended, you can do retail and office in a EA zone. It's only when it's part of a preliminary development plan. And the preliminary development plan that you're going to see does not include these uses, but a future EA development may need those to become economically viable or to provide convenience to the residents who might then, so there might be a doctor's office or medical supply store or something like that that would serve those residents.
Any questions?
I just have a comment, I'm for it. I would think we would want to vote favorable action on this.
Mark?
Yes, Paul.
The Board of Selectmen recognizes the need for this type of housing in this community, and we think this is a good location and a good use of the property. We thank the owner of the property for being willing to entertain this project, and he has indicated a willingness to work with the community and with the Board of Selectmen in connection with making this development work well for the town. And for those reasons, I urge you take favorable action on this article.
Can I just ask a question? RE stands for what?
Mark,
REA stands for what?
Elderly and it's residents, elderly and affordable.
Thank you.
Yes, Grace.
I just want to say something because I
Can
think
you
it's
identify
important.
yourself, please?
Oh, Grace Shepherd, Rockwood Street, sorry. The planning board supports this article because it's good planning. It may, incidentally, the idea may have occurred in relationship to a particular project, but the reason the board supports it broadly is because this is a good change to the opportunities for careful development, adding certain services in places as appropriate and with proper controls. I don't think it would be good planning to just throw it in because it's needed for one project. That isn't the case.
Yeah, but when I commented, that's more what I was commenting on, not a particular project. This is something we would want in our zoning bylaws. It's smart growth because it just allows further development that's related to the existing development. Doesn't require new broken ground or anything like that. So from a smart growth planning perspective, this is something we would want in our bylaws regardless.
Okay, I'll take a motion to recommend favorable action on Article 13.
Moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Passes 8-0. Article 14, to see if the town will vote to grant preliminary development plan approval pursuant to Section 5.6.3 of the zoning bylaw for the rezoning of land located on North Main Street and adjoining excess Woodhaven land now owned by the town, as such land is more particularly described in the legal property descriptions on file with the town clerk, to Residence EA District, so as to permit the development of newly constructed over 55 housing, as well as the use of the existing structures for housing, office, retail, assisted living, or other municipal purposes as detailed in the preliminary development plan presented at town meeting, or any amendment approved at town meeting, or to take such other action related thereto.
Good afternoon, Jim Murphy, Bear Hill Road. For many years, when I've come to the Saturday sessions, the focus has been on expense, cut them, delay them, avoid them. And for at least the past 10 years, I think the Board of Selectmen and the advisory have urged the town to put in or adopt policies on the other side to increase revenues. And we have had a succession of the Revenue Enhancement Committee, the Ideas Committee, the Financial Levitation Committee, the Revenue Development Committee that we have now. And each of them, I think, has identified projects that they think would accomplish this goal of increasing revenue to the town, increasing the tax revenue. But they've always said, without increasing any demands on the school system, and make sure you maintain the character of the town, particularly its historic buildings, and make sure you address senior housing, and make sure it's close to downtown, close to Woodhaven, close to the churches, close to town offices. Make sure it's not too big, make sure it's not too small, make sure it's not too cheap, make sure it's not too expensive. Make sure, in other words, that it's the perfect porridge for this town. And you have to use existing zoning procedures and planning board protocols and give everybody a chance to approve it or not approve it at town meeting and have their say. And I am very proud to stand here on behalf of Bob Murchison to say that this needle has been threaded with this plan. And I'm going to break the presentation into 3 pieces. It's basically a procedural one that you might not be familiar with, a substantive one, and then we'll also talk a little bit about the financials. Procedurally, what has to happen is that we have to get approved a preliminary development plan at the time of town meeting. We have to submit at the time of town meeting, and this is what it is, the actual preliminary development plan. And that has to be the thing that becomes approved at town meeting by a 2/3 vote. And as part of that, and I'm going to skip all the way to the end on this so that you can see, as part of that, we have to provide in that preliminary development plan of boundaries, topography, wetlands, location and bulk, floor plans, architectural character, design, dimensions, streets, walkways, grading, drainage, utility, open space, owners, dwelling density, floor area, and what prices we think we're going to sell this at. And then, if in fact it is approved at town meeting, it's not as if the path is over. Then what happens is that we actually apply for further review of a special permit in front of the planning board. This is all laid out in the zoning code, starts with 5.6.3 and it goes on sequentially. The detail that we have to give to the planning board is greater than the detail that we have to put here. But it tries to give some fair balance between spending some money, so everybody knows what it is that the plan will be, to spending all the money if in fact it can't get past town meeting. Now, the other times in which the EA has been used, and I'm sorry I'm not as adept to know how to get to the front as fast as everybody else, but the other times it's been used, this EA zoning has been with Leland Farms and with Woodhaven. And this is really the first time that I'm aware of that's being used for a private development. The requirements to satisfy this procedurally is that the land to be rezoned has to be 6 acres. It has to be within 1 mile of the downtown, which is defined to be the intersection of Main Street and Washington Street. It can't have more than 4 units per acre. And it has to be either elderly or affordable. And so with that, I know that people are very anxious to see what this is, but this is the overview of what it looks like. It's not like a novel where we have to guess what's going to happen next, so we're going to go right to it. You'll see that what's designed here, and then we'll get into the details of how it's amalgamated, is that the idea here is to put in 18 unit development in which there are 5 3-unit buildings, and they are 5 new 3-unit buildings, and then there's the existing manor house or Peace Abbey house that's going to have 2 units in it, and there's the Dowse Library, it's going to have 1 unit in it. There's parking in each of these. We had a whole bunch of site constraints, which I'll kind of skip around to, because I know on the timing I'm a little tight. All kinds of site constraints. Those are wells setbacks, there's zoning setbacks, there's septic setbacks, and what ultimately is going to happen is that we have in this property, the Peace Abbey property itself has 2.3 acres made up of 3 parcels. There's a 0.4 acre parcel where the library was, a 1 acre parcel where the parsonage house was, and 0.9 acres in which the vacant land next to it. They were also acquiring approximately 2.95 acres from George Fisk, and we're going to look for a small amount of land here and here from the town The reason why we need this is there's some setbacks. Also, we need to get up to 6 acres. And really what this is going to do, and hopefully it'll ask me a little more questions so that I can show you some of the other detail. But once we get that done, then what it's going to do and generate is it's going to generate to the town, if these are all built out in this 550 to 650 range, that average, approximately $212,000 in extra revenue to the town on a yearly basis. And this is really what the town will get. This is something that integrates all the things that the town's needed, incredibly visually attractive. The actual units themselves, they look like this from the outside. And then inside, each of them has a garage. There's 2 bedrooms in each of these units. The middle one is handicap friendly. It has the bedroom on the first floor, and then it has a loft, I think, on the second floor, which is on this one. They are attractive. I think they're keeping with the scale of the town. 80% of the property will still be open space. There is the opportunity, as Paul discussed, to integrate pathways, sidewalks. If I go back even further, we will be closing off the entrance before to the Peace Abbey property. Before, this is the driveway. This would be closed off. There's also a driveway over here that'll be used during construction, then ultimately it can be closed off. The septic system would be put up here. The wells, there'll be 3 of them, one here, one here, one here. There is a storm scepter system for separation of the oils and any catch basin system. The team that Bob has put together includes Rob St. John and his architect David Beelman. And it really is a project that is going to be super for the town. It does, as I said, it does require, we say a land swap, it says here. And the reason for that is because where you put the septic system, you need some setbacks. So up here where we're going to put it, you need a setback on your own land. So that's what requires us to carve out a little bit of land up here. Otherwise valueless land, you can't build on it. And as Paul indicated when we met with him in the very beginning for Article 15, if in fact we don't build it, it all reverts to the town. So this has the functionality to work for what the town is, to basically take and purpose land that otherwise has no purpose for the town, and really leverage that town ability to give land to this project to really up the ante on the amount of revenue coming in, as well as deliver services that are needed for the town. And I know that I've overstepped my limit. I'm happy to go back to any of these slides in more detail to answer any questions that you have, but I want to at least be respectful. Ultimately, we're going to be asking you to take favorable action on Articles 14 and 15, and I can talk more about 15 if you give me time to.
Are you the proponent on 15?
We are the proponents on 14 and 15. We're the ones who asked the selectmen to put it on with the planning board.
Well, then it would seem to me that we really ought to discuss them both at the same time.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if you want to,
All right, on
ahead.
the land swap part of it, we've called it. As I said, the place where the building is, and you can kind of see it over here in the corner, so have that in mind as you're looking at this. The places where the buildings are, that we're required, if we meet all the zoning, to have 100 feet off the front and 60 feet off the back. So to do that, what we've done, and then we have to respect all of the zone 1s of the existing wells for Woodhaven, those are these up here, and the zone 1s for the new wells that are proposed. And as I said, we have to also have a setback for our septic system up here. So what we're proposing to do is to have a land swap of land, because what's going to happen is we need some of this land up here, but then some of this other land may not be as necessary for us. But ultimately, as I said, we need 0.8 acres. Now, there is a procedure that exists that allows for this to happen, and Article 15 imagines that. Article 15 refers to a procurement process which respects the provisions of Mass General Laws 30B, Section 16. And 30B-16 basically says that if, in fact, a governmental body, the selectmen, seek to rent, convey, or otherwise dispose of real property, they can declare it available for disposition. If there is more than 2,500 square feet, which this is, they have to go through a process of advertising and submitting it for open bid. But they also have the ability to specify in the offering what restrictions, if any, they will place on this use of the property. So they can specify that this property will revert to the town unless it's used in connection with a preliminary development plan that includes senior housing for the town. They can do all those things. They do have to, the governmental body has an obligation to, quote, determine the value of the property through procedures customarily accepted by the appraising profession as valid. So let's think of one of two things is going to happen. Either because they've used procedures customarily accepted by the appraising profession as valid, it's either going to have no value, and they're going to say it really has no value. It has no value to the town of any use because it's excess land that they can't be built on, can't be used for any of the wells that they have or any of the septic that they have, and it really has no value. That's one choice. They'd still have to go through the advertising process. We'd still have to make a bid on it. Or alternatively, they could say, we've gone through this process and it has some value. We'll pick out a number, $25,000 say we pick. And they say, oh, it's worth $25,000. That's what we have. They go through the process. We put in a bid. We don't put in a bid for $25,000. We put in something less than that. Or the developer does. I should keep on saying we. It's a habit of lawyers, I think. Only when it's good things that their clients are doing. Otherwise, they say they. So I'm going to say we all the time with this one. In any event, in that circumstance, the town can still convey the land. All they need to do is to list reasons why they chose to take less than what they had determined the value to be and publish them in the Central Register. That's it. There is nothing that prevents the town, if they choose to, if they want this program, if they want this project, to get this land conveyed to this developer, contingent upon him building this preliminary development plan for Abbey Road, and getting both Articles 14 and 15 to get favorable action, votes by the recommendations by the advisory committee, and then action by town meeting. So I know I've overstepped my 5-minute limit, and I appreciate you giving me that extra time. But I would urge you to take favorable actions on 14 and 15, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to also have Bob answer any questions. He has a lot of passion, persistence. I can tell you one quick story. December 21st is when we closed on this property when Bob closed on this property for $1 million. The next day, I met the tax collector on a Saturday at 9:30 in the morning and delivered to her the $55,000 in back taxes that was attributable to this property. So this is something that has before not generated much income for the town on a pure economic fiscal basis. I'm not saying that it didn't deliver other things for the benefit of the town, but it has the real opportunity to take something that's currently assessed for about $1 million, which is about $19,000 worth of taxes, and generate, at his risk, $212,000 annually in taxes. He's the one taking an incredible risk. He's the one who's put in $1 million to start with. He's the one that's put in all the money for the engineering to do all this, to get us to this part in 3 months. And he's the one that can deliver this project for the benefit of the town. And as I say, again and again, I urge you to support it.
Is there anything that prevents school-aged children from living in these units?
No. If it's the deed restriction is that one of the two people that lives in the apartment is 55 years old, but no, there is nothing that.
Mark?
Yes, Paul.
Article 15, if you read it carefully, authorizes. That's giving us the authority to go forward with this. I want to emphasize that. Secondly, as I mentioned before, there is a need for this kind of housing in town. It's consistent with the long-term interests of this community that we have good quality housing for 55 and older. The selectmen believe this kind of housing should be provided in Sherborn. This is the correct location for this kind of housing. We see an opportunity to integrate Woodhaven, Leland Farms, the shopping at what we call the Citgo, and the downtown area with this new development. We have talked about a sidewalk. It's not shown on the plans, but we're talking about trying to obtain what we need to do a sidewalk along the front here that would connect Woodhaven and Leland Farms so that people can walk. We've also had some discussions about the possibility of a senior center being part of this development. Those discussions aren't concluded, but they've indicated a willingness to talk to the board about that possibility. So we see this as an exciting opportunity for the town. Again, going back to the word authorization, it gives us an exciting opportunity to work with this. The final point would be that it's our intent to put in any conveyance a reversion back to the town. So if this doesn't happen, or if some years from now the project never gets built, everything will revert back to the town, and we will not be out the land.
Jim, did you say that there was a swap considered
Because
here?
the only part that's a swap, I just want to kind of point out two different types of things that are, you know, in the hurry to get everything out my mouth, I might not have said. You'll see that this area here comes off Village Way. Some of this is on the developer's land, and some of it is still on town land. So this is going to require that there'll be an easement from the town, so that's part of what's going to happen with the land here, an easement from the town, but the developer would be the one who would put this in and maintain it, and as part of its obligation. The other parts on the swap, as Paul said, relate to the fact of not only a sidewalk here, depending on what the setbacks are. We have a 100-foot setback in the front. If we're more than 100 foot and some of this land is necessary or desirable for the town for a sidewalk, then we can do a fee conveyance. If it isn't sufficient because it still would affect our 100-foot setback, then we can grant them an easement of that land. So there could be some swapping of easement or land with respect to these access points here. Then the part that's a little bit more imperfect, although it's not perfect, it's imperfect, is that we have done some, Bob has done some perk tests. The perk tests tell you where you're going to site the septic system. And we showed you that in essence this is probable, if we say this is where it looks like it's going to be, we probably need some land up here. So, and we probably need some land here. But we might not need all of the land in quite the volume. And so if it's desirable or necessary for the town to get back some land, we could perhaps give them this corner up here back, because that's where the town's septic system is. So we do have that detail to work out between now and town meeting. The way in which this works is that we have to submit everything that we're going to use at town meeting within 2 weeks of town meeting. So there will be an actual property description, but we'll use the benefit of what the town has done in previous articles, in which we give the selectmen some small authority to amend that in connection with anything that passes that's non-substantial. So we are finalizing that. So we didn't want it to be that, oh, we know for sure it's this actual square foot right here today. There might be some small changes. Some of it might require us to give some land, and some of it might be some greater parts or lesser parts in different areas, but the concept is the same. Net amount that we need is about 0.8 of an acre.
And would you anticipate that all of those issues would be cleared up by the time this conveyance got done in terms of the sidewalk and all that?
Well, there's really kind of two parts to that. One, on the conveyance part, as Paul said, there's gonna be a reverter part that they're gonna put in this. So it basically is dependent upon us getting the special permit from the town, from the planning board. The planning board will contain as one of its conditions that we build this plan, subject to doing all these things. And so then at that point, we have the perfect opportunity. Luckily, again, good planning of the existing thing allows the planning board to make these adjustments. It also allows them to make, they can't increase the size, we can't get it higher than 18 from the planning board, but we could get lower than 18. Of course, that might not make it economically feasible, but it still has the possibility. So the planning board can do things necessary to make it work as part of their conditions. So, you know, again, you wouldn't go and survey all this land and find it out exactly if you didn't know you were gonna get past today. And you certainly wouldn't do even more work for engineering, et cetera, if you didn't get past town meeting. So it's a good balance, we think, and you can see the detail that we've done already, that we've really gone very far to be able to get to this point in 3 months. And I think it just shows you what is intended in the future. I mean, this is a local Sherborn guy who sees something, knows this property, knows these people, and is gonna do something. It's not, you know, the planning board, you know, unfortunately for them, they frequently come, this is good general planning. This time, you have good general planning articles that they're presenting and a specific proposal that the town can get behind.
Yeah, pay for that mic, can I have it back?
Only if your name is Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, exactly. No, thanks. Just, Paul was pretty clear on certain things, but for me, some of this is new to me, but I think overall, everything is terrific. Where I was struggling was just understanding what we do under Chapter 30B, which is what the town would be authorizing us to do. And that's horse trading. I think Jim explained it pretty well. I think the whole project is terrific. I've been trying to get with Bob back and forth, but life gets in the way. So, you know, the real key is there's a process under 30B, describes what you do. That's what you're authorizing us to follow. And we figure out what the values and so forth. This will add all sorts of value to the community. So clearly, it makes sense to me. I wouldn't get in the way of it. Thank you.
I'd like to follow up on the swap question. I understood, you know, swapping a driveway easement for sidewalk easement. That sounds great. Then there's the other land, and, you know, you might give that back corner, which I guess is just swampland down by the railroad, you know, over to the Woodhaven property.
It's actually dry, but yes.
Okay. That's it?
Otherwise, we couldn't have the septic system there. So just to put a little more clarification around this, I would estimate that we will end up needing about an acre of what is currently town-owned land to make the project work. And when I say make it work, just to back up for a second, this entire project is a gigantic puzzle, an engineering puzzle. When you're trying to put public wells for this development and mesh them with public wells for Woodhaven and Leland Farms and septic systems for it, you see all of those circles, and you're left with an incredible puzzle. And so the approach that we ended up taking was we started with all of those engineering facts, and that kind of forced us down into what will work, okay? Then the next thing we said is, well, what are our setback requirements? So we got the buildings where we knew they could go from an engineering perspective, and then we said, well, we have to set back 100 feet on the front, as Jim said, and 60 feet on the sides. So then we literally drew the new lines for the property based on the setbacks from the only place the buildings can go, if that makes sense to you.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we reverse engineered. The same thing is true for the septic system. In order for the septic system to be big enough, then you need a setback to it. Again, we drew those lines. So what we've ended up with by doing this, a long-winded answer, is that we're gonna need about an acre of town land, and we believe we'll be able to return 2 or 3/10 of an acre of other pieces of land, sidewalk, back corner, whatever it might be. And there's a further complicating thing about all of this in that the town actually can't convey an acre of land to us, because the town, from a, not to get too technical, but from a nitrogen loading perspective, only has 8/10 of an acre that it can be allowed to give up. Otherwise, it's out of compliance with its septic. So it's all very complicated, but net, we're gonna take an acre, give 3/10 back. What we've drawn, I think, is really close to what that's gonna look like. But I don't wanna draw the final lines until I have a septic system that's designed, because then I'm spending money drawing lines that I just have to.
No, the point of the question is, I think the design is great and the intention is fabulous. I was just concerned about the swap. It sounded, you know, like one consideration in return for another consideration, and I was trying to
It was just the net,
get
the
some
net part.
color on that.
But let me just add to that, that I mentioned before that I have a vision here of a senior center, a public-private partnership that would create a senior center for our seniors.
No, Paul, take that out.
Take it out?
Take the concept of a senior center in there. That's, I think you're prejudicing the judgment.
Hang on, I think
Has to make.
we don't want to have sort of, if we're going to have comments, please come to the mic. Paul, you want to finish up, or? Because I think I'm ready to move this.
Okay, I withdraw my comment for the time being.
Thanks. I'll take a motion to recommend, oh, sorry.
This looks like a great proposal, great idea, but before you get my vote, you're gonna get rid of those plaques and statues. I've been opposed to just about everything that the Peace Abbey has been in favor of. They're out there waving plaques, Hiroshima, Hiroshima, terrible, terrible Hiroshima. And we also have a cow statue. He rescued a cow from a slaughterhouse.
Elliot, I think we're getting off topic again.
I have the floor, I'll talk as long as I like. And we've got this cow statue, and he rescued this cow from the slaughterhouse, and every now and then he comes up, we should all become vegetarians, and cow, 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 and you got these plaques of all these other peace advocates. And before you get my vote, you'll get rid of those statues and plaques. They moved out of town with the Peace Abbey and left the statues and plaques behind. What a kick in the shins to the town of Sherborn, that we've got to sit here and live with those damn fool statues and plaques for eternity while they're long gone. I'll be voting no. I want everyone in Sherborn to show up at town meeting and vote no on any proposals until those idiot plaques are gone. Thank you.
Robert?
Robert Johnson, Western Avenue. I see a little bit of difference between a couple of the plans that were up there. If you look at the one that's on the board there, it looks like the buildings are touching one another. If you look at the...
This question did come up at the planning board. For presentation purposes, when you put them up there, they look like they're touching. They are not touching. They won't be touching. We did send an email to the fire chief specifying the types of things that it would satisfy. You'll see on this one here that this is an emergency throughway for the fire trucks to get through here, that will accommodate both the pumper and the ladder. And although it does appear here, Robert, that they touch, they don't touch, they will not actually touch. And they are fire-rated walls in between the units, and it will meet the codes, so hopefully that answers that.
Have we got a ballpark of a minimum clearance between buildings?
I don't think we,
I don't, this is a preliminary plan, obviously, and we're gonna need to talk to the fire department, to the planning department, and go through a whole process about what's appropriate and what works, and we will absolutely do that and look forward to it. It's, I don't, yours is a great question. I just can't tell you the answer right now.
Okay. Take a motion to recommend favorable action on Article 14.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Passes 8-0. I'll take a motion to recommend favorable action on Article 15.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Also passes 8-0.
Thank you very much.
Article 16, to see if the town will vote to amend sections 4.6.3, small c of the zoning bylaws pertaining to the planned unit development special permit provisions in the following manner by deleting subsection 3 in its entirety and replacing it with the following. Small I, 3 retail outlets should be limited as follows. One retail outlet may be allowed up to a maximum of 6,000 square feet of gross floor area. 2, no other individual retail outlet may exceed 2,500 square feet of gross interior floor area, which area shall not include mechanical storage or kitchen space, or take any other action related thereto.
Okay. The purpose of a PUD, planned unit development, is to enable use of land in a way that's beneficial to the town. And the town passed a PUD, we've got a PUD now, where it limits the maximum size to 2,500 square feet. It's never been used. The planning board held a hearing, and really the feeling is that an inhibitor to development in the town center is that because this is so far, our 2,500 square foot is so far from what is considered doable for an anchor store, like a grocery store, that a developer looks at that as a severe obstacle and goes to a different town. And I think that is the case. We did change our parking requirement, which was, I'd say, one of the most onerous in the state, to average. We did that, and I think this is really in the same mode. If we'd like to see development in the center of town that increases density, that adds tax revenue, then we need to make the PUD into something that is reasonable. To put this in perspective, the Bacon Street, Tilly and Ivy grocery store in Natick, and then the Dover Market are both in the range of 6,000 square feet. So that's what we're talking about doing. So this is something that I think is in the same vein. It's long-term, it's good for the town, it's good for a viable town center. We look at what's the development in our region along major corridors and in the city. Sherborn is a semi-rural town. If we want to stay viable and sustainable, a vibrant town center is really critical. I think it's necessary. There's a study in Connecticut where they really made that point, saying that town centers that aren't vibrant, that don't have a reason to use, those towns really suffer. And this is in our long-term view, enabling this type of development, a grocery store or an anchor store, then this really moves us in that direction of a more vibrant and interesting town center. All the same controls that are in the PUD, which are extensive, the process of plan of a development occurring, go through all the same extensive and very rigorous process. So this is just changing. The only change here is to go from 2,500 square feet to 6,000 square feet.
Well, what makes you think it's gonna be a grocery store? I mean, once you have a general square footage, you can't control what it's gonna be, can you?
Not more than what's currently, the controls we currently have. I mean, we do have a list of what's permissible and what's not. But so no, we can't specify grocery store.
And do you have any research at all to show there's interest in having
Yeah, there's been
somebody coming here to put in a market?
There's been interest in the past, there's been interest in the past that precedes the PUD that we have and afterwards. And speaking with one of those interested parties, I don't know, roughly 7 or 8 years ago, their experience in negotiating with the town was not a friendly one, and wasn't really interested in looking at redoing a battle like that. So I think if we, the town, are interested in this type of thing happening, then this puts us in a much better light and would make maybe negotiation possible to resume with that particular developer or some other developer.
Also, one particular interested party about, I don't know, 4 years ago or so, went to the point of hiring out, conducting a market study that, for a grocery store that indicated market demand of roughly 6,000 to 8,000 square feet. So this puts us right in the bottom of that range.
Do you have any projection on the tax revenue that you think, if you had a store of that size, a grocery store of that size, as to what it would actually yield?
Well, again, I think this should be looked at more in terms of development rather than just that specific building. Because I think if we look at the town center now, and we've talked about it, it's in our general plan to make use of some of the parking area along the western side of North Main and things like that. There's opportunity for development in the center of Sherborn that would be beyond one specific store. We in our draft town center report, we created a couple of scenarios. One was without water and sewer, which we don't have any municipal utility now, and said under this particular scenario, it was about $60,000 of additional tax revenue under the scenario we created, and on another scenario, it was about $170,000 with water and sewer. So those are obstacles that still have to. This doesn't change the water and sewer obstacles, but it shows you what can happen if development is enabled.
So this allows one 6,000 square foot space, either in an existing building or in a new building, right?
Right.
So, I mean, who do you think would be, who would move in?
Well, I mean, we've had historically, we've had markets, we've had general stores historically. I think it's quite reasonable to expect we'd get another grocery store.
How big is the apothecary?
About between 2,500 and 3,000 square feet.
I mean, wouldn't they be the most likely candidate? I mean, they're already running a store that's much smaller than their corporate model.
It's possible, but you're right, their corporate model is more like
Nothing
12
wrong
or
with the
14,000.
They won't do that.
Again, the process of the development goes through, the PUD process. The town has a lot of input. We get a lot of input. So, I think a developer's gonna look at something that's economically a win-win, and it's what the town wants. So, I think that's really,
Some other questions?
Yeah, you were clear about, I guess it is clear what the benefits to the town are. What's the risk to the town of going from the current cap up to 6? What is it that could happen that couldn't happen otherwise?
It's kind of like our parking. We used to have a very, very onerous parking requirement for this relative to the square footage, and I think it's kind of the town's attitude saying we want to make sure nobody can comply, so we get to use that as a negotiating tool. And unfortunately, what the parking did was it said, you know who complies? Kind of the concrete block convenience store that's sort of famous for having a big parking lot and a concrete building in the back. Those are the ones that would comply with that. So that's not what we want. What we do want is a development that's in the smart growth mode, that improves the walkability of the town. That's in the PUD now. So the going from 2,500 to 6,000, the risk is that we'd lose one negotiating tool. But really in the PUD, the language, all the stuff we have to negotiate with, and the discretion we have is pretty strong.
So it's not particularly a risk that someone would apply for something that you otherwise couldn't exclude when for town planning purposes you would want to exclude it.
For example, if a 7-Eleven came along and wanted to.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, another example is if it was a business that I wanted, no, bicycle store. But it is a negotiating tool, just like parking. It's a negotiating tool. Realistically, no serious development is going to happen with an anchor store of 2,500 square feet. So the risk we have now is there's no development.
Ben?
Really quick, question on the drafting of this. The second section says may not exceed 2,500 square feet of interior floor area, which area shall not include mechanical, et cetera. Is that to prohibit mechanical storage or kitchen space altogether, or to say it could be 3,000 if 500 feet was devoted to those purposes?
Yeah, that's actually existing language, that's not
Okay.
change, that's not a change, that,
All right, well, I was just trying to understand.
and that is the purpose, so that if there were a cafe or restaurant type of facility, that their storage and preparation space would not count in that 2,500.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll take a motion to recommend favorable action on Article 16.
Moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? All against? Passes 7-1. Article 17, which deals with a temporary moratorium on medical marijuana treatment centers. And I'm not going to read this whole thing. Do we have a proponent here?
Well, we put it through with the DS span, so this is a moratorium. Initially, we talked about prohibiting it altogether, but that's illegal given what's happened at the state. I'm no attorney, but the AG made it illegal. This allows a moratorium until the state figures out what it wants to do. The folks at DS Span found this language acceptable. It was drafted by Barbara St. Andre, our town council, who is very expert at these matters, so the board is behind it and supporting this.
This is the maximum possible language allowed by the AG that accomplishes the goal of the DS Span article. They approved that. The AG language vetted by Barbara. This was the best we could do to meet their intention.
Mimi Creer did leave some
Some materials, I think, are on the back
materials there
table
if
on
anyone is interested in
DS
it.
Span and so forth.
Nancy, would you like to comment?
Nancy Hess, 64 South Main Street. This is the first time I've read through this, but I'm just wondering if in section 473, where it says, adopts a temporary moratorium prohibiting the primary or accessory use of any land or structures within the town for a medical marijuana treatment center, shouldn't also have added the language that's further down that says, and related uses, because this doesn't prohibit having something to grow the marijuana or any of those other related uses, whereas down further it does speak of related uses. But if this is the language that we're going to adopt, perhaps that little phrase should be in there with.
It defines medical marijuana treatment center in 472 as all encompassing.
Really.
It's everything. Cultivates.
Food, tinctures, aerosols, transfers, transports, sells, defers, distributes, dispenses, administers.
Okay, well, for some reason, it looks like it's necessary to have and related uses in the further description in the moratorium, so I'm just wondering if that shouldn't also be in the verbiage to adopt.
referring to the Department of Health regulations.
Okay. I will take a motion to recommend favorable action on Article 17.
Moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Passes 8-0. Okay, Article 18. To see if the town will vote to amend the general bylaws by amending Chapter 17, General Wetlands Bylaw, as set forth in the handout to be distributed at the annual town meeting. Copies of the proposed amendments to the General Wetlands Bylaw are available at the town clerk's office, the Board of Selectmen's office, the town library, and posted on the town's website, or take any other action relative thereto. Hi, I have copies of a marked up bylaw. Does anybody need it who doesn't have it already? I've been handing it out. Anybody else? Okay. Is this thing working? Okay, fine. Michael Lesser, Sherborn Conservation Commission. The warrant we have today is part of a process. We were in the process, the Conservation Commission was the process of redoing and revising its regulations and cleaning them up. Out of that process emerged the fact that the bylaw itself since 1981 had a number of outdated and not such clear terminology here and there, and a few differences with the state law on procedures. So we stepped back, and what we are proposing here in this copy that we put forth is a set of changes to the bylaw to clean it up in terms of some of the language, get some outdated stuff removed from it, with the bottom line being this is a legal opinion from town council. We've worked very hard to just sort of do housekeeping kind of measures here, and there's a line here says that none of the changes that we're making here expand the commission's jurisdiction. This is part of a process where we're trying to clean up an old bylaw as a first step of just sort of the most obvious kind of clarifications and outdated stuff. We then want to move to our regulations and clean them up so that they're clean in their sense, in their own right, as well as they conform with this bylaw. And then we can come back to issues that are more substantive about the bylaw itself after that have gone through this sort of initial process of whether there are substantive issues that people feel about increasing or decreasing the commission's jurisdiction. But that is down the road. This is, we're trying to be very clear that this is a housekeeping measure here, and we've tried carefully to make sure all of these changes, as I can go through, as questioned, there's a copy. It has annotations of where a lot of the cases are just exact wording from the state act. And we added things that are just useful to the town, such as you can hand in your paperwork, which we didn't have before, and things like that. And we dropped a section that was outdated. I can march. We can march through all of these things individually as questions come up. Not in 5 minutes, but.
Right. I offered to do this process earlier in your schedule, but I was relegated to today. But again, it's part of a process. We want to clean this thing up so that we don't have any things that are outdated or misleading or whatever else. And then we can work on our regulations with a set of through public hearings that will be going on in the next year. And then we can come back to the bylaw. There are lots of issues of whether people want to have different jurisdictions or go back to a different type that's based on some more recent model bylaw work. But at this point, we want to just bring this thing up to eliminate any of the sort of older stuff in this thing. And I could just go for just examples of just getting the wording. Sometimes here's a case where we're dropping a whole section because we just want to match the definitions that are at the state. It was suggested that it would be easier. We could have gone either way, but in this case, we've just deferred to the state definitions because they were the same as before anyway. And some of the more bigger changes not a bigger change, we've dropped the terminology of permit, which was not in the, which is not a term used in the state act.
It's used in the regulations, but not in the state act. We're trying to be clearer, that we issue orders of conditions. We also issue issues around whether there's determination of applicability, which is other terminology that's been added here. So we've tried to add the specific wording of what it is that we actually issue from the commission into this language here. And every little change, most people, I think, find out, even, and we added, let's say, in the first paragraph where it looks like a change here, we had wildlife before as an interest. Turns out, at the state level, it's really wildlife habitat. And in the end, we really are regulating a habitat. We're not regulating the little creatures that are running around out there. Right. I wish we could tax them all, right? And then revenue enhancement.
I'm all for it, revenue.
For every little vole. And we added riverfront area in there because that's what's at the state, is in the state act. There's questions people bring up here. We've changed permit here, in this case here, to order of conditions, because that's what we issue for things. People say that that maybe is bounded too narrowly. We'll check again with town council, but again, we've tried to work with town council, and we've had the assistance of other citizens who are lawyers, that these are changes that hopefully are clarifying. And thank you. And again, we strived hard and have made little changes along the way to make sure they're not changing our jurisdiction. That's a subject for another day. I'll leave it at that for the moment. Thank you. Grace?
Grace Shepherd, Rockwood Street. I just wanted to say, since I headed the list of citizens who had a citizen's petition, which is Article 34, that was started because last year's version of this cleaning up of the bylaw had been somewhat expansive, and then the Conservation Commission put the project entirely behind them for the while and concentrated on other issues. We therefore felt we should just ask the town to revert totally to the state. But at this moment, I want to say that I think this is just exactly what Michael said it was. It is making it consistent with the law and clean and non-expensive, so I suggest it's something you should support.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question related to that and then make a comment? Would the citizens are they gonna withdraw their, or just take no action?
Grace, can I, sorry.
Are the citizens gonna ask us to take no action on the other?
I think the answer is yes.
That would be good.
Yes,
Great,
decomplicate things.
yeah. So we cross that off
Do you
later.
have a comment?
Yeah, I had one comment, just in support of Michael's presentation. You know, the main thing from our standpoint, Sherborn treats the 100-foot buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetlands as a resource area, and that's where we're more expansive. That's the key part, that we're more expansive than the state. We want to continue doing that. We want to treat that as a resource area. That doesn't mean that it's a no-build zone. It just means that you have to come in for a order of conditions and get proper conditions on that when you want to build in that area. So the good thing about this bylaw is it doesn't change, our more restrictive jurisdiction than is provided under the state, which is based on our local conditions and the fact that we use, private drinking water and private septic. And the other part of the reason for us to support this, in my opinion, there's a crucial part of our existing bylaw that's it's not just inconsistent, it's illegal under the state agricultural exemption. And what Barbara St. Andre did was rewrite our bylaw so that it doesn't conflict with state law where the agricultural practices exempt our local action in certain areas. And then the only last thing that I would point out is our town is very fortunate. We do have Barbara St. Andre, who has prepared a detailed track change version of the bylaw that anybody can view. And I would just point out about Barbara, this is all she does. I don't know how long she's practiced, but all Barbara St. Andre does is work on these types of issues. So we got a lot of bang for our buck on this bylaw amendment. Anybody can view it right there, and she laid out exactly what's changed where, and I would recommend that we vote favorable action on the bylaw.
Barbara?
I have a different point of view. I've been reading a lot of bylaws, and they're all on the website, state website, or DEP, I can't remember which one I'm looking at. But they all are in terms of permit. Nobody has the words order of conditions. And I think there's a reason for it, because the state law does not have a 100-foot buffer zone. The state regulations do, and that was enacted in 1983. Our bylaw was written and amended in 1981. It was amended to include a 100-foot buffer. Now the state law our regs have codified it to have jurisdiction over a 100-foot buffer. Not jurisdiction automatically. It has to be a notice to make a determination of whether it's going to affect the wetlands. And it's made it clear that it's not, the 100-foot buffer is not a resource area. Now, some towns have, especially around our area, have included it as a resource area, but it has to be included as a resource area in the bylaw. So it is not included here as a resource area in the bylaw, nor does it say anything about the home rule exemption for doing that. So I think this is order condition confuses things, makes it seem like we are, I'm so nervous. It makes it seem like we only do notices of intent. But there's other things here which are not in order, but there's a notice of a determination of applicability, an abbreviation, notice of resource area delineation. None of those require an order of conditions. I think that's why the use of permit is used and should be used, and it should not be a resource area unless the town votes on it. And I think the regulation should be, I agree that 34 should be approved.
Okay, Mark, can I just say in response to that, Barbara, that's just not right about the 100-foot buffer zone. It is a resource area under our bylaw. It says no. Yes, it is, because it says no person shall, and then all those things, or within 100 feet of any land, and then it goes on about the wetlands. And an order of conditions, but let me just finish. That is how we treated the 100-foot as a jurisdictional area. So that part that you're saying is not correct. And the thing about an order of conditions or permit.
There's some Superior Court cases that do say that you have to have specific language in the bylaw that indicating 100-foot is not sufficient.
That is where it says that you're not allowed to do anything there unless you come and apply for a permit.
I disagree.
And the other.
I have to get a court case out there for you, but
I'm just.
It's the Superior Court that's telling us how we have to define it in the bylaw, and I'm saying it's not there.
It's in that part that I'm citing. And then the part about an order of conditions or a permit, the reason you call it an order of conditions is you're entering an order on the applicant's notice of intent. And then it's not just an order either saying yes or no, it's an order of conditions. You're either denying the order of conditions, or you're imposing an order on the notice with conditions on that project, which make it comply with your
So what you're saying is everything requires a notice of intent, no matter if you're just asking to see if it applies or not, because everything applies in a buffer zone, is what you're saying.
That's what you have the request for determination of applicability for, is you go in and you.
In whether it's a buffer or not. If it is
Yes.
a buffer, automatically you have to
requires-
make a notice of intent, is that correct?
No, if you apply for, let me just back it up a little bit. You make the request for determination of applicability if there's any question. Concom comes out and they inspect it. If they find that it can be conditioned without a formal notice of intent, they will do that. But what the preferred practice is if your determination of applicability requires more than 2 or 3 conditions, then what the commission requires you to do is to come in for the full-blown notice of intent. So that's where all of this process is built in. Then you file the notice, and then you get the order of conditions.
If you look at state regulations, the state regulations, they specifically say that jurisdiction is not necessarily indicated in a buffer zone. they
Barbara,
not?
But that's exactly what I'm saying. That's where we're more expansive. We treat the 100-foot as requiring you to come into the Conservation Commission, which is more
Well,
expansive
so
than
does
the
the state regulations.
We
Yes,
don't
they
always
do.
require the notice of
They
intent.
require you to come in under these three things in order to make a determination by the commission whether it's going to affect the wetlands. The wetlands are not defined as buffer zone. That's my only point.
Yeah, and my point is, we treat the buffer zone as something
I
that
agree
you
with
have to
that.
come in, and
I
we,
think you're wrong.
we do it
That's all.
for, we do it for.
I
good-
think your regulations are wrong, and that's why I think they should go back to the state.
The
and
regulations
tell us
is
to-
a separate matter from this
I
bylaw.
realize that,
Then
but
what your point is,
I want to take the
yeah,
condition.
what your point is you don't want us to treat the 100-foot buffer as
That would be my position, yes.
a resource area. And all I'm saying is, the bylaw, we do treat it as a resource area, and we do it based on local conditions. That substantive question isn't going to be removed. Barbara didn't make any change on that substantive portion
No,
of the
she
existing
did not, but the only thing she put in as order of condition was presupposes it's a notice of intent. I think it confuses a thing. This follows exactly what the state regulations say. The state regulations do say specifically it does not apply to the resource area unless you include it
Yes.
as something in your bylaw, which it does not.
Thank you. Michael, let me ask you a question. Town council says, in my opinion, the most recent version of the proposed amendments does not expand the commission's jurisdiction. What about, are you giving up any jurisdiction under this? Not that we know of.
Not voluntarily.
No, we've tried to keep it neutral. Okay, good.
Yeah,
Try
what
to
they're,
be very
what they're giving up
procedural and
jur-
neutral in
Yeah,
this.
what they're giving up jurisdiction over, which they don't have in the first place, is just the part that conflicts with the agricultural exemption. We need to do that.
And it wasn't even clear that we had more jurisdiction there. It was just not appropriate language. Don?
Just an experience I'm having at the very moment. Don Crawshaw, 198 Western Avenue. One of my projects occurs in 4 towns, Weston, Canton, Newton, and Wellesley. And we get orders of conditions. We don't get permits for doing a particular project in those particular 4 towns.
Susie?
A lot of effort to get up here, guys. Susan Taylor, 26 Weston Avenue. I'm also a member of the Conservation Commission. I just want to point out, as regards to resource area in the buffer zone, the word resource area is not mentioned in our bylaw. It is mentioned in our regulations under section 3.1. And if you read what we consider in Sherborn to be resource areas, banks, wet meadows, marshes, swamps, bogs, vernal pools, and land subject to flooding, land underwater bodies, and riverfront area. It does not mention that a buffer zone is a resource area in Sherborn. Thank you.
Can I just clear up something? Because honestly, it's troublesome when people just quote things that just aren't true. And I'm just gonna repeat for the last time, and then I'll let you say things that are not true over and over again. We do treat the 100-foot buffer zone as a resource area. The second paragraph of our bylaw says, no person shall remove, et cetera. And then it names all the places that you can't do something without getting the permit. And one of those things is within 100 foot of all these things. That's where it is treated as a resource area. So please, it's difficult to make reasoned decisions when people just get up and they spout things that just aren't true.
Regulations off the town website.
Susie, it's in the bylaw.
No, it's not in the bylaw.
It's in the bylaw, what I just read to you, that you can't do anything in the 100 foot without coming before the commission. That's where it's treated.
That's true, but the buffer is not considered a resource area, so we're not protecting the buffer itself.
But people can't do anything in the buffer without coming before the commission, so of course you treat it as a resource area.
This shows how much fun we're gonna have when we do our regulations. But this change doesn't affect that in any way, right?
Right.
Okay.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, this is a housekeeping article. This is to clear up the language to make it consistent with state law. This is all that this does. We should not have a discussion about policy. That may be the subject of some other article, but at this point, this is only legal housekeeping. And town council is going to be here Tuesday night at your meeting, and she will tell you, if there's any lingering questions, exactly what I'm telling you now. This is strictly housekeeping.
Okay. I will take a motion to recommend favorable action on Article 18.
Move.
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Thank you.
Passes 8-0. Article 19, to see if the town will vote to amend its general bylaws by adding a new Chapter 27 regarding minimum maintenance of abandoned and severely neglected buildings. And we'll leave it to Carol to.
Some things aren't a matter of opinion.
Aren't you a judge by now?
My opinion is black is red, no.
Yes. I think technical difficulty. I don't know if I have the right connector. I have two different ones, but
That one should be the right one with the video connector in it. They're both right.
yeah, I don't know which one.
That one is a DVI. That
This
one
one?
we can put away.
Yeah, but it's not, unfortunately, it's not.
I checked the other side.
Yeah, I don't know.
Love the Apple device.
Oh, a tech person, you mean? Yes.
I know.
Apple plugs in.
How much are you? It should work.
Oh, I see.
They've expanded.
Is it running on Apple Juice or?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I was surprised because I used it before. She used it. It's not working this time. Same what?
My hope is in a couple of years this will be so seamless.
That one connects, but then it doesn't work. It doesn't then.
Yeah, it has to work with this thing, so.
One of those has got to fit there or you're out of luck.
Right. Well, maybe we can.
Save it on that.
Oh,
Yeah.
Mr. Higley, hero to the rescue.
Yeah, memory sticks.
Get to see my bicycle.
Yeah, on the TA stuff, before we all start, let me just say one more.
This is like a mystery. This last time I came, I brought one of these.
The thought is to keep rah-rah to an absolute minimum. That, you know, used to be this fact-based thing. You announce the authorities will be here Tuesday, let that go, Tuesday will do this thing. And then on 25, like his measures and adjustments, and then to do it without any emotional content at all. Just facts, you know, this is what it is. Tuesday we have another shot at it. That would be minimum. Yeah, people can answer the questions. Absolutely right.
Yeah.
No flames? Some things just aren't like, you know what I mean? Like 2 + 2 = 4. It's not a matter of, well, my opinion is it's 8. But, all right. This is where you find your Buddhism. Just sort of let the times right
The technology is working.
I'm sorry, your 5 minutes are up.
I wouldn't have said that.
Gotta love the technology. All right, I'm gonna talk right into the microphone because I have a cold and I've basically lost my voice. And I know, I'm sorry. I'll try not to cough while I'm here.
Don't sneeze.
Yeah. So I came before Selectmen and Advisory to talk to you about this bylaw a little over a month ago. Since then, we talked to Barbara St. Andre, and she marked up the bylaw. She gave us great feedback about changing it. The bylaw requires minimum maintenance for abandoned, severely neglected, or blighted properties. So I hope you remember that from our previous appearance in front of both of these boards. The biggest concern we heard was questions about enforcement, and the original version used a lien. It used actually a similar mechanism to other laws that are out there that impact blighted properties. Barbara St. Andre did a great job in working with us of using a different mechanism. I asked her if we could come up with a mechanism that has little or no cost or liability to the town. So that's the mechanism that's built into this bylaw now. We've talked a second time with Planning Board, and I felt that most of Planning Board supported it. They expressed support. The building inspector supports this. The fire chief and police chief have reviewed it. So let me talk, I'm going to go straight to enforcement because that's what changed, okay? And just to remind you, the first part of the bylaw talks about the fact that this applies to buildings that are vacant and very dilapidated with significant maintenance issues. This is not peeling paint. This is not shutters falling off. This is a hole in the roof, the wall, the window. So the enforcement mechanism has been changed so that the process that would take place is the building inspector conducts an investigation into the building situation. The owner is given 60 days notice to correct the deficiencies or submit a plan with a timeline. If the owner, too loud, sorry. If the owner fails to respond, there's a fine of $200 for each violation per day. The owner can appeal to the selectmen on this. The building inspector would then submit a complaint. If the owner does not respond, the building inspector then submits a complaint to the district court, which schedules a hearing at which the owner obviously can testify. The building inspector would testify, would bring forward the complaint, and then it is turned over to the court. And this is why there's no expense to the town. When I talked to town council, she said that the way this mechanism typically works is that the court will typically settle with the owner if they will go ahead and make the maintenance. And they might settle if, let's say, they had a fine of $10,000 that had gotten to $10,000, they might settle for $1,000 and remedy the maintenance. The building inspector, when an issue like this is going on, the building inspector would report to the selectmen on a monthly basis. And so there are typically no legal costs to the town. So the version that you're looking at right now was substantially edited by Barbara St. Andre. She also did, and I'm happy to put the redlined version of it up on the Historical Commission website if people want to, people in the town want to be able to review that with her comments. And she did also forward to the selectmen a letter that described basically how this is different or complements other laws that are out there. So there are a couple of other laws that can be used in situations like this. I know that in town there are a couple of properties where these laws have evidently have not really proved to be useful in addressing the situation. I think one of the reasons is that there are a couple of reasons for that. The purpose of this bylaw is actually to prompt the homeowner to make repairs before the building is so dilapidated it has to be torn down, okay? So the idea is, when a first serious issue arises, the homeowner will be prompted to maintain their building. The other laws that are available to the town are GLC 143, which empowers the building inspector to secure or remove dilapidated buildings, and then GLC 139, which empowers selectmen to compel removal of dangerous dilapidated structures. The problem, I think, with both of these from the town's perspective is you use a lien. When I talked to Barbara St. Andre, she said the towns typically have to have some funds to do this. If they move forward with these, then they typically have to have the funds to actually, secure the building themselves, and then they charge the owner, or tear down the building themselves, and then they charge the owner. So it's not very workable for Sherborn. So one of the things that I liked about getting the, I guess I could go through some more of this, but time is up. So one of the things I liked about this is that it really is, Barbara St. Andre guided us toward a bylaw that is very appropriate and relevant for Sherborn and will help, eliminate the issue of dilapidated buildings that could be an attractive nuisance where children, teenagers, vagrants, anybody who wanders around and explores things could get into these buildings and hurt themselves. So that's the gist of it.
Thank you. And remind us, how many other towns have these kinds of
There are a lot of towns that have these kinds of bylaws: Walpole, Newton, Reading, Lowell, Nantucket, and Medway. They're all, slightly different in how they do it, but they fundamentally have something similar.
Okay. Can I ask a question? Because I'm still, to be perfectly honest, totally confused as to what this does, or what authority this gives the town of Sherborn that it doesn't, in effect, already have with respect to a substantially in disrepaired building. The reason I ask that is because I don't see that, and in both sections where you talk about what the building inspector can do, he says, or alternatively, they can use the state statute to fine someone the same $200 or to remedy an unsafe building. So since there seems to be, even in this proposal, reference to an alternative approach for the building inspector, it is not clear to me as to what authority this gives the building inspector that the state statute doesn't already give him.
The way this is constructed is that it can be imposed earlier in the process, before the building becomes so dilapidated that the logical step is to have it pulled down.
Well, I know you're saying that, but I've read all three definitions, and all three definitions seem to suggest a building that is in really, really, really bad shape. No one's going to live in a building, I don't think, that is so bad that it's in partial ruin. I mean, these definitions are very strong. So, I can't imagine, given the definitions, that the building inspector would say, you can't do that. Right. Just read the definitions. They're incredibly, this isn't peeling paint, the definitions.
No, the point is that even if you take a house that has it's developed a hole in the side of the wall through neglect, and you fix that, then the integrity of the building is maintained. That's different from, I'm not sure what wording you just used.
The building inspector pursuant to this statute, or this bylaw, says they can take the action of finding, et cetera, if the building has a hole in it. Not if the building doesn't have a hole in it. And what I'm saying is, if there's a building, your house has a hole in the side of the wall, and that's a habitable building, there's a hole in it, the roof is falling down, it's in partial ruin, it's dilapidated. I mean, I'm just substantial physical distress. All I'm saying is, this statute talks about a building that's in really bad shape, which is covered by the state statute, as you recognize, because you say they can refer to it. So again, I don't understand what additional authority this gives to the building
point is
inspector.
that there's a different enforcement, and that, the method of enforcement that the town has used in the past evidently hasn't worked, because there are buildings that are dilapidated now that it was not enforced. This provides an enforcement mechanism that's very practical.
The one enforcement I notice is the building inspector can fine the offender $200 under our bylaw, the proposed bylaw. Under the
Okay.
state statute, they can be fined $200. I repeat, I'm missing what additional authority this is giving the building inspector. I'm done.
Maybe it's enforcement that's out there, like.
It's the enforcement that's different. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but bottom line, the way Barbara St. Andre explained it to me is that when you put a lien on a building and when you go through the other methods that are available, those towns typically have a pot of money that they need to have in place there in order to enforce them. And that's why it's not very workable for a town like Sherborn. And that when I talked to her, that's what I asked her. I said, can we come up with an enforcement mechanism that is not going to be expensive for Sherborn and put them in, a position of having to spend a lot of money or put a lot of legal costs out?
Jim?
I have a client who has a building at 2 North Main Street. It's a brick building. It's 99 years old. It's currently not occupied. It was used as the life experience school. The bricks, somebody could say, are spalling. The utilities are disconnected. The Board of Health has told us that as far as they're concerned, we cannot use a septic system. We cannot get a certificate of occupancy to use that building, to put a caretaker in there. So I'm worried on the other side of things that this is then, quote unquote, an abandoned building, and that it therefore is subject to this, that you'll tell me that the building inspector wouldn't possibly think of applying. Now, I recognize that we have properties at 14 Farm Road. We have this property, the 2 North Main Street, which is the the Life Experience School. And then we have the one that's further down on North Main Street that the roof's caved in and they have the little orange fence in front of. So I really am incredibly nervous about having a client who has to have right now an abandoned building. It's not being used for residential or commercial purposes. Its utilities are disconnected. And it is subject then, under this, if the building inspector so chooses, to a $200 fine. I also think that if you're going to do all the other things the town's going to do, then the Board of Selectmen, it should have their designee. It shouldn't be the Board of Selectmen. And at least the one that I see in the published warrant doesn't have an appeal process to the Board of Selectmen, that at least in my version, maybe it's someplace else. So for all those reasons, I just don't think this is ready yet.
If I might make a brief comment, part of exactly what these last 3 cases have illustrated, starting with Mr. Rudin and going forward to the details that Mr. Murphy has just brought up, the list of negative conditions that you have to have, right? I mean, how do you define what conditions constitute this irretrievable condition for the building? It's a slippery slope. You can't account for all of them. You know, Jim's example of someone who intends fully to do something productive with this building, but yet through circumstance is exposed to this kind of judgment. You can't write all that down. There's no way to get it right. It's invasive, it's a slippery slope. I mean, there are other specifics that I'll defer to Selectman Caruso for, but it just seems that there'd be no way to rationally define how this works.
Yeah, so he threw the ball my way, I'll grab it. I'm happy about the efforts here to try to do something.
Yeah, no, we concur, that's a good idea.
I just don't, I agree with
This
Mr.
way.
Murphy, I think we're not quite there yet. This has a whole bunch of areas that are subject to interpretation that aren't well defined. There's a whole bunch of building inspector actions which aren't well defined. One of my favorites is that it calls for him to report to us monthly at the Board of Selectmen. I've been here for almost a year, we haven't had him yet. And the other part that if I owned a farm, I'd be concerned about the blighted and severely neglected, which the way I read it does apply to farm buildings, including barns and outbuildings. So I think
It
this
doesn't actually apply.
Again, the way I read it, it does. So I'm just saying that I find it not ready yet.
We concur.
It says abandoned does not apply to accessory buildings and structures on the premises, including but not limited to barns, sheds, and gazebos.
Yeah, I said blighted and severely neglected doesn't have that qualifier.
I wonder if I
But
may
nonetheless.
expand on Jeff Rudin's question. He wanted to know what this does that this town could not already do. And I would like to ask the Board of Selectmen, the famous house on North Main with the blue roof and the orange fencing, is there no legal path open to the town at this time to deal with that building, which would reinforce the need for a bylaw? Or is there indeed something the board could be doing about that building which we all know about?
I think there's a torturing process in process now.
I can't speak for the building inspector, but I know that he's actively involved in that premises and that we've identified a potential developer or repairer or constructor who will take over the buildings and to fix it. But apparently there's some permitting issues that are involved with that, and they're trying to sort out the permitting issues. So the best remedy here would be not to demolish the building, but to allow the private party, again, according to the building inspector's last report to us. I don't have a current report. We can get you one and try and provide it for your Tuesday meeting, but the last report that we had was that they were working with a private party to get it done.
Right, the best answer is there is a slow, inefficient, imperfect process in play.
You have no legal power to do more.
As a Board of Selectmen, no. We do
No,
not.
I actually have a comment on that, because it came up when I was a selectman as well. There are options. They're very aggressive, and we instead took a less aggressive approach with it.
We did.
And I'm glad we did, because it does look like there's something in the works, and that if you went ahead with a willy-nilly demolition, then they're facing permitting problems and issues as a result of that, as a result of a full demolition.
You may not get anything
So-
back there.
And the other thing that came into it, because the building inspector had spelled out our options, town council did as well. We did have the option of condemning it, knocking it down, but then we had to store the contents and who's gonna pay for the demolition, and all those issues came up. So, and also in terms of like a neighborly approach that we try to do in Sherborn, we took a path of being less aggressive and trying to work more with that property. And that's why I think the town is at the point it's at now with respect to that one particular parcel. So there are options. They're very aggressive, and when you take really aggressive options, you want to do it for a compelling reason, and you don't want anything, to counter that. But we didn't want to take that aggressive approach in this case.
And just to follow you, George, the consequences of the aggressive actions that we could have taken were not only legal, but knocked onto the future as to, if we did go ahead and demolish that building, what kinds of permits and permissions could we get to replace it with something either that we owned or that somebody else owned? The whole process of restarting was almost more onerous than working through the imperfect, impossible process that's being worked through right now.
But
So-
this is exactly the point of this bylaw, is that the other remedies that you have are so extreme, and they tend to be oriented toward demolition, whereas the point of this bylaw is to find the owner at a point when it's relatively small violations. And I disagree with the interpretation of the wording that says derelict. It clearly says here that it's things like broken, holes in the roof, in the wall, broken windows. That is not the same as, the building slumping over. The whole point is preventative maintenance.
We have a couple of people want to speak on this.
Hi, Chuck Young on Maple Street. I wanted to echo some of the things that Jim was saying and that Peter was saying. Certainly a lot of the language here is very severe, as Jeff pointed out. Some of it isn't so severe. The definition of blighted and severely neglected is not limited to abandoned buildings. It could include the homes that we occupy. And the language includes decay, including but not limited to deteriorated exterior walls, roofs, foundations, or floors, or broken or inadequately secured windows or doors. So while the intent of this is laudable, and I support it, you need to be careful, we all need to be careful about the words are, because I read this as to say that if I have a broken window that I'm a little slow in getting fixed, it could fall within this definition of blighted, read literally. My understanding was that this was intended to apply to abandoned buildings, and it is not. As I think Peter pointed out, the limitations in the definition of abandoned don't appear anywhere in the definitions of blighted or severely neglected. So at least the draft, if this is a current draft, I'm very concerned about the breadth of some of the language.
Neil, did you still want to speak, or?
I think George covered what I was going to say. Thank you.
Robert?
Robert Johnson, Western Avenue. I'm generally in favor of this. However, I would like 2 words to be removed. If you look at page 6, the very top line, about in the middle, it says boarded up or. And I think that those 2 words should be removed. My reasoning is that if one has an abandoned building and we, the town, are required to make it safe, what do? We board up the windows and doors so as to prevent unauthorized entry. And so, fine about broken windows or doors, but let's not condemn the remedy. Let's make sure that we can board up those windows and doors that are broken to prevent unauthorized entry. So I would recommend deleting those 2 words, boarded up and or.
Okay. I think given, the importance of whenever we add bylaws, and the fact that I'm not hearing a lot of advocates for this, I'm going to take a motion for no action.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of no action on Article 19? All against? It's passed 7-1. Article 20, to see if the town will vote to appropriate a sum of money received by the town from Odessa and the treasury of the town, which, when added to previous appropriations as voted by town meeting, is to be spent by the Board of Selectmen to fund the construction of intersection improvements at Whitney and Western Avenue intersection, Brook Street and Western Avenue intersection, or to take any other action related thereto.
Good morning.
Morning, Don.
Don
Good afternoon.
Crawshaw, Western Avenue Intersections Committee, 198 Western Avenue. When we met before, I did give you pictures of the two intersections. Would you like to see them again?
I don't know if you were here when we started the meeting, but we're giving proponents 5 minutes, so.
Okay. Fine, thank you. So on the next page in the handout, there is the exact funding situation. The 2007 and 2008 town meeting appropriations, 53,139.46. Expended on data collection with traffic solutions was 9,892. McMahon, the engineering consultants who have produced the drawings, specifications, and details for the two intersections, their final invoice is 35,265. So there is a balance remaining from the prior articles of 7,982. The Treasury has received in 2010, 11, and 12, 57,533.56. So the funds now available in the Treasury are 65,516.02. Engineers' estimate from McMahon's is not the 60,000 that I indicated when we first met, is in fact $45,000, including a 22.75% contingency of 8,342. So over the years, citizens have met with the planning board and many boards of selectmen, and it was agreed as a result of those meetings that funding would come from Odessa, which would be used for the Western Avenue project. And in fact, after the 2008 town meeting vote, in 2009 in July, Planning Board did again award a special permit for 3 years with approximately 19 to 20,000 a year. The money that you see that's come in. And in the wording, which we've had from Planning Board, it is primarily intended for use on Western Avenue. But again, to be ultimately decided by a vote of the Board of Selectmen. So I've included the two town meeting reports, if you would look at those. And then, one of the questions that came up from our town accountant was whether the money had in fact been received. And Selectman Caruso raised the same question, and that has been answered in an email which is in the package from the town accountant. Yes, the money has been received. So why I'm here this morning is to ask for advisory to support Article 20 so that the town meeting can then vote to approve the use of funds from Odessa now in the Treasury, which would then enable Board of Selectmen to vote to complete the Western Avenue Intersections project, which is now shovel-ready and ready to go, subject to final appearance in a public hearing before the Board of Selectmen if we get the funding from town meeting approved.
So, we don't, unfortunately don't have our accountant here, but maybe Peter, you understand this.
No. Yeah, he does.
This money
The money is in the bank.
is in the bank and
And
can
it's
only,
only usable for.
Western
such
Avenue.
purposes. No, I won't say it's only usable for Western Avenue, but
Such
it's only
purposes.
usable for purposes specified in the permit, which principally has been used for Western Avenue. The other point that Don made was that we've gone through town meetings to get to this point of there's a design of remediation of the traffic issues on Western Avenue. And so the money's available, it's not coming out of free cash, it's not coming out of the general,
It's already
it's coming out of the
appropriated.
general fund, but you can't touch it unless it's voted at town meeting.
thank you.
No-brainer.
How much are they asking for?
Can you please use the microphone?
45,000.
45,000.
45,000.
But it can't be used for anything else. We should buy everybody.
John, John Higley, Saddlebrook Road, Planning Board. Just to clarify one thing that's been said a couple times. In the Odessa permit, there was a change from previous permits in that we struck the sentence that said, "The intent is that such funds shall be used primarily for Western Avenue for the purposes set forth in the prior sentence as indicated by the special permit's history." So we struck out primarily. The prior sentence says, "Such funds shall be used for such police details or if directed by the Board of Selectmen for the design and/or construction of traffic calming and/or traffic safety and/or pedestrian improvement measures on Western Avenue or such other streets impacted by Odessa traffic as they may deem appropriate."
Thank you.
Where did that start, John?
Last year.
Mr. Chairman?
So does that apply retroactively?
I would say no.
What's the date of the permit, John?
It's June of last year.
You see, what I mentioned this morning deliberately was the permit of July 2009, which then brings money in for the 3 years after that. And those are the funds that we're talking about today. I'm not talking about the special permit, which was voted in 2012, which has a broader meaning.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. The change from the current permit and the previous ones the change is, this time we struck out the sentence that said, shall be used primarily for. That's all. The other sentence was there and is there now.
So how does it read?
So, yes.
I'd like you to read the 2009 permit.
This is, actually, I'll read the 2009 permit.
Yeah.
And then the change in the current permit. The 2009 permit and the current permit both read, "Such funds shall be used for such police details or if directed by the Board of Selectmen for the design and/or construction of traffic calming and/or traffic safety and/or pedestrian improvement measures on Western Avenue or such other streets impacted by Odessa traffic as they deem appropriate." That sentence is in both, the previous one and the current one. What's not in the current one is, which was in the 2009 one, is the sentence that reads, "The intent is that such funds shall be used primarily for Western Avenue for the purposes set forth in the prior sentence as indicated by the special permit's history."
Thank you. Peter?
Peter Lifford on Doppingbrook Road. It's no news that I'm averse to spending money on Western Avenue. I live over there. I use it all the time. I think there are a couple of corrections here, or observations that should be made. The language is primarily, not exclusively. The money shall be used primarily. And when we hear the recital of how much money has already been spent on Western Avenue over the years, endlessly, I think we've met the primarily part of it, and doesn't have to be, every dollar exclusively has to be used. When the representation is made that these design improvements for the intersection have been endorsed by town meeting, I find that laughable, because they haven't, all right? They've been through numerous committees. I know I've seen a sketch once or twice. My understanding is it's narrowing Whitney Street coming into Western to a single lane so that we can back up the traffic past Whitney Farms in the mornings so that they can't get out. I understand that part of it. But honestly, this hasn't been vetted. The designs have not been vetted. The funding, all right, again, is not exclusive to Western Avenue. And I would ask, the same test that you applied to Goulding Street West and Mill Street, apply to this. Don't you have other intersections that are equally impacted that in fact are crying out for funding and attention and design? And the most classic one is the fine tuning we did right out here, but needs so much more and costs so much more that we didn't do it. A far more dangerous, a far more involved intersection. And there are numerous other ones in town impacted by Odessa traffic and needing funding. Thank you.
Sean Colleen, I'm on traffic safety. I'm also on the Western Ave intersection committee. At this point, we really don't need to continue talking about the permit. It certainly allows us to spend this money. It may be up for discussion of where we spend the money in the future, but that money's there. We're not even gonna use all of it. We're not asking for all the money that's there. And this, that's really all I got with that.
Rick or Susie, are you in line?
I'm all set. I'm just prepared in case I have to. I'm not going home.
Mark?
Neil?
I was just going to say that certainly, I think there is some merit in making some revisions on Western Avenue, but I also want to reiterate the point that I think there's other areas that have been impacted by Odessa. So if they do go ahead and spend monies to make the repairs that have been suggested, we should start looking at other places where we do have higher accident rates and start improving those roadways with some of those funds.
Don?
What has taken almost 15 years to get to this point is an example of how long it takes to get to the point where a project is shovel-ready. And it takes many meetings of many citizens. And the citizens came up with the idea of getting the money from Odessa on a yearly basis, which is now available to be used on this project. And it was discussed as an example of a way in which intersections in Sherborn could be addressed. And this money will be coming in, not only this year, but next year and the following year, and can certainly be used on studies and meetings for other intersections. But all I'm saying is, having taken 15 years to get to this point, and having managed to find a way of funding it so the money is now in the Treasury, let's get the job done. We can have many meetings for many years on the other intersections, and I would support that. But here we have an example where the money's there. The engineers have done the study. The project is ready. And the ultimate decision will still rest with the Board of Selectmen as to whether then to spend the money on Western Avenue 2 intersections.
Paul?
3 points. 3 points. First, a comment was made about, wow, how much money has been spent on this. Well, let me point out, if we don't complete the project, all that money will be essentially wasted with regard to Western Avenue. We're on the 5-yard line. We've driven down the field. Let's go into the end zone. The second point is that the Western, I don't know what your name is, the Western Intersection Committee, whatever it is, has been before the board several times with all kinds of plans. So there has been extensive public meetings and extensive public discussions, almost repetitive of what you've just heard, regarding these plans, and there will be more. So it's not exactly a secret project. The plans have been public. We've gotten comments. The third point is what I call the fire escape syndrome. Whenever there's a building that burns down, one of these big public buildings, you always find a clump of dead bodies by the door out. And why does that happen? It's because everybody tries to go through the door at the same time. And all the experts will tell you, if people just stopped and go through the door one at a time, everybody could get out. But instead, everybody tries to go through at the same time. Well, it's the same thing with these projects. When you get a project ready to go, it's not a good answer to say there might be 100 other projects that should go at the same time. We got one that's ready to go through the exit. Let it go through the exit. That's all we're asking here, is to let this project finally get done so that we don't have to have any more meetings with this Western Avenue group.
Tom.
So it's just,
Tom Urmson, Hollis Street. I'm also a member of, what's the name of your committee, Don? The Intersection Committee. I'd like to support exactly what Paul just said. And looking at Don, I'd say his, over the last 15 years with his involvement with Western Avenue, his hair has turned white for sure. Because of all the time and a little bit of aggravation along the way. I used to be on the planning board, and we were back in the old days. It was a major grind for us to get through the permitting process with Odessa, designing the conditions, et cetera, et cetera. The orientation has been towards Western. Now, let me just make one point, and that is that if you look at the numbers that you have in front of it, and most of you don't have the numbers, but let me review them with you. We have in the bank right now, including money left over from the 2008 town meeting appropriation, we have $7,000. We have a total with funds that have been received in 10, 11, and 12. We have a total of $65,000. Now, we were talking about the cost of this project being, for both intersections, being $38,000 plus a contingency taking up to $45,000, maybe a possibility of some engineering expense. But there's more than enough money, particularly with the Odessa contribution that we expect to get this year, although that would have to be next year's town meeting approval. There is more than enough to take care of Mill Street and Woodland. So I think to echo the point that's already been made, that we have a stream of money coming in of $20,000 a year. Other intersections may be able to take advantage of those funds. So we're trying to close the circle on Western Avenue. As Paul said, we're trying to end the discussion, and I'm hoping that you can see your way clear to doing that.
Sue?
Hi, Susan Tyler, Western Avenue, and also a member of the Traffic Safety Committee. I just had a personal comment as regards to the two intersections. Yes, $45,000 right now is suggested that it will complete both the design and the construction of Brook Street and then also Whitney Street. I myself and some other members of Traffic Safety, we have some concerns about the Whitney Street design as to whether that should be done as planned. But ultimately, it's coming down to the Board of Selectmen have the decision as to the final plans. So while we do not agree and we feel that it should be a test run on any design on Whitney Street, certainly the Brook Street should go forward. And ultimately, it comes down to the Board of Selectmen per the permit as to how the monies are spent. Thank you.
Oh, yeah?
This is 649th time I have said Brook Street and Western Avenue should be a three-way stop. I've been told that many times that the state will not approve it. Until the state does approve it, I'm opposed to spending any money on Western Avenue. Thank you.
And just for the Board of Selectmen, I think 2 seconds. I think that just for the reasons that Susie pointed out and the reasons that Paul pointed out, the money's committed. We have it. It's in the Treasury. It doesn't commit us to any construction. We have approval of the plans. It seems like going forward is the right thing to do.
Okay, I'll take a motion to recommend favorable action on Article 20.
Move.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Okay with that.
All in favor? Right on. Passes 8-0.
Thank you very much.
Article 21, to see if the town will vote to amend the Personnel Administration Plan by amending paragraph 5 of section 12, FMLA and service member family leaves of absence by deleting the sentence, Appendix C contains any explanation of the notice requirements when an employee seeks FMLA leave or take any other action thereto.
Fred Zellahead, Cider Hill Lane, Personnel Board. This should be a simple one. This is simply removal, deletion of reference to Appendix C, which doesn't exist. So apparently, what was on Appendix C got incorporated into the policy at some point, and the reference to the appendix just never got eliminated.
There is no Rule 6.
There is no Appendix 6.
All right. Rule 6.
Okay. I'll take a motion to recommend favorable action on Article 21.
Moved.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor? Passes 8-0.
I should get some points for that.
Got him with us.
First year yet. Rock on, man. Really, well done.
Article 22, see if the town will vote to amend the Personnel Administration Plan Appendix A, titled Positions Within Job Classifications by adding the position of Lieutenant to exempt position Job Classification 2, or take any other action related thereto.
This should be easy too. Should be really quick. As I had mentioned to advisory during my presentation, the police department eliminated our sole 20-hour per week employee that was entitled to full benefits, my former administrative aide, and I decided to implement a lieutenant's position to fill that role. And the Board of Selectmen have supported that idea, as well as the Personnel Board.
Board of Selectmen sees it as fiscally sound and a good move all the way around in keeping with reduction of supernumerary employees and benefit loads. And we vote yes.
Any questions, comments? I'll take a motion to recommend favorable action on Article 22.
Moved.
Second?
Further discussion? All in favor? Passes 8-0.
And for the record, I was quicker than Fred, so.
I'm not sure about that. Yeah, but he eliminated a non-existent thing. Right? That's hard.
Okay.
Well, he did good.
Are you gonna take a break, do you think, or, I don't wanna stand between people and their
No, what's,
5-minute break?
23 is probably good.
yeah.
23 is a good one
How
to
about
take a
we
break
come-
before.
We come
Yeah,
back
but
at
it's an hour and a half
we come
break.
back
I
at
think
20
we're
after
fine.
3.
Yeah. How about till Monday?
Let's take a break and come back at 20 after 3, please.
When does happy hour?